The women who want your vote for Secretary of State do not have enormous disagreements over how elections should be run. They do question each other's judgment, big time.
I just want to explain how dangerous this is to Colorado elections.
See, there you go again, Jenna, misleading people about my record.
Next presents the race for Secretary of State. But first, an election conspiracy theory group tells Coloradans not to use ballot drop boxes and warns that its members are watching every ballot box in the state. And a school goes beyond learning to offer its students and their families health benefits, food, even clothes. All that, and our fifth debate of this election year on Next. Elections officials are warning against voter intimidation as a far-right group with an affiliated militia in Colorado claims that it is watching every ballot box in the state. This conspiracy theory group, FEC United, which has claimed that Colorado's elections are rigged, is now encouraging its members to go watch people vote. FEC United, whose founder, Joe Oltmann, has called for public hangings of his political opponents, is also distributing these flyers telling people not to vote by mail. FEC United says it has distributed thousands of these flyers, which tell people to preserve their mail ballots as evidence and then wait to vote until Election Day and to vote in person. The activist group's advice against voting early is actually at odds with the directions from the Colorado Republican Party. Colorado GOP's chairwoman actually used to lead FEC United. But the Colorado GOP is telling voters that they need to be voting as early as possible by whatever method they choose. We say poll watching is not illegal as long as the watchers don't interfere with or intimidate voters. Take a look at what happened in Arizona over the weekend, though. Law enforcement investigated complaints that these armed men in masks and tactical gear were recording video of voters at drop boxes. It was determined those men's actions did not violate Arizona law. We discussed FEC United's promise to have people watching the polls in Colorado with the Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold and her Republican challenger Pam Anderson when they were here for their debate today.
Well, I think it's very concerning to see groups with a tied militia say they're going to monitor. To be very clear, voter intimidation is illegal under state and federal law. And on top of that, I worked with the County Clerks Association to pass a new law this year. It includes banning open carry within 100 feet of a drop box, a voting center, or where you process ballots.
We do have good voter intimidation laws, but I think I will continue to lead and stand up and push back against violence and rhetoric around our elections, and making sure that we are continually pushing back, not only as a local election official, which I did in Jefferson County, having transparency with parties there, but also I recently pushed back against Joe Oltmann and that type of reprehensible rhetoric that is not right for our democracy.
We'll have much more from that debate in just a moment. A school in Denver's Cole Whittier neighborhood is expanding what it offers, not just its students, but their entire families. It's a new approach to what a school should do. Our Byron Reed has the story.
Wyatt Academy is getting used to a neighborhood that's been adapting for over a century.
Before it was a predominantly neighborhood African-American, Latino. Now we're seeing a lot of different changes.
Marlene Fleitas is a volunteer and a parent at the school and says it's a place where she can be involved in her 6-year-old daughter's education.
As parents, it's very important that we are involved in anything that has to do with children, in the classroom, outside of the classroom, activities.
Her daughter Esmeralda is learning at a school that teaches more than lessons in the classroom.
We support not only Wyatt families, but also the community at large.
Wyatt Academy created a family empowerment center that offers no-cost services like clothing and food to help support their families in need.
And we heard loud and clear over and over about the rising cost of taking care of a family and raising children today. It's expensive and it's getting more expensive. And so how can we really come together as a community to work to support our families through these challenging times?
Kate Silverman is the school's development director. She says they're serving about 150 families on average per week.
So this is the My Benefits app.
Now the school has a new resource called Wyatt Family Benefits that gives families access to services that support health and well-being.
There's vision, dental, diabetic supplies.
All at no cost during the school year.
We serve a predominantly minority community that does qualify for free and reduced lunch. And we know that many of our families are either underinsured or uninsured. And so this is a way that we can really step in and meet that need.
Ready, read.
The school hopes they meet all needs for students like Esmeralda.
All of this is part of our vision for truly serving our community.
In a neighborhood that still keeping up with the times.
Wyatt's been standing tall in this community since 1898. And one thing that has never changed is just the power of community.
For next.
And they make me feel welcome and special. And my daughter does too. She loves it here. And what else can I say?
I'm Byron Reed.
The school says a donor who wants to remain anonymous has funded that program completely through the end of the school year. Hey, quick thank you for raising more than $30,000 for International Hearing Dog, the nonprofit based in Adams County. They train service dogs to be the ears for someone who's deaf or hard of hearing. Your word of thanks microgiving has now raised $9.7 million and counting. We'll be back Wednesday with a new idea. Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold and her Republican challenger, former Jeffco clerk Pam Anderson, are both running on their records of improving elections. That's where we began their debate today.
As the Jefferson County Clerk and Recorder and as the elected nonpartisan city clerk and executive director for the Clerks Association, I led with my bipartisan colleagues, culminating in 2013 with a bill that provided access, our model that we have today. I also won an award for my work on our risk-limiting audits, and I backed that up with paper ballots and supported those so that we can validate our elections are accurate with those paper ballots. Transparency is key with bipartisan public boards that certify that our elections are secure and accurate. And I'm very proud of the access points and the security that I've worked for nearly 20 years as a certified federal and state election official.
Ms. Anderson, thank you. Ms. Griswold, if you could tell the voters what you have personally done to improve elections.
Sure. Well, when elected in 2019, I led an agenda to increase voter access in the state of Colorado. Working with our state legislature, we increased the number of drop boxes. We increased in-person voting. We guaranteed for the first time ever access on every public university and tribal lands. I also led a new form of automatic voter registration, which has registered over 350,000 eligible Republican, Democrat, and unaffiliated voters. And then on top of that, Kyle, you know, when we've seen threats to our election infrastructure, I've acted quickly. Whether it was in Mesa County, when Rogue County Clerk Tina Peters compromised her voting equipment, or in Elbert County, I've protected our election infrastructure to make sure that every eligible Republican, Democrat, and unaffiliated can have their voice heard.
The candidates for Secretary of State talk about trust. It's clear they don't trust each other. You will decide who earns your trust and your vote.
I do think it can be confusing to voters and to me that while Pam isn't an election denier, she campaigns and says she supports election deniers. 30-second spots saying, "Trust me, I'm your government," isn't going to get us through this.
Next presents the race for Secretary of State. Continues after this. Back now to Next Presents, the race for Secretary of State. Both Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold and her Republican challenger Pam Anderson have faced questions about partisan politics. Ms. Griswold, when you've been criticized as too partisan to be Secretary of State, you've said that protecting elections is about the truth, that it's not a partisan issue. And this race is an interesting test of that because your Republican opponent is not an election denier. She's one of the most forceful voices in the Republican Party against conspiracy theories. But yet you've misleadingly suggested that to your supporters that you're running against an election denier. You've accused her of pandering to extremists. You basically painted her as a Trump-supporting MAGA Republican. Is that protecting elections or is that just partisan?
Well, that's untrue, Kyle. I know you're referencing an email that the campaign sent out several months ago, and it doesn't mention Pam Anderson. It mentions Tina Peters and Mike O'Donnell, two election deniers who were in the primary against Pam. And actually, I've said over and over again that my opponent is not an election denier. I've said that in front of her. I've said that to the media. And you also put some words in my mouth calling her a MAGA extremist. Again, I have never said that. I don't think she is a MAGA extremist. I do think it can be confusing to voters and to me that while Pam isn't an election denier, she campaigns and says she supports election deniers. I think that can be confusing. I think it was confusing in the primary how she said she would crack down on ballot harvesting, a conspiracy theory made popular by Donald Trump in the extremist movie 2000 Mules. Those are things that can confuse voters.
Ms. Anderson, you in fact have campaigned alongside election deniers, including the Republican candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Danny Moore. But you recently criticized a scheduled event featuring Moore and fellow election denier FEC United's Joe Oltman. You called him reprehensible. Can you explain to us why you are comfortable keeping company with some election deniers but not other election deniers?
So I am a registered Republican, and a center point of my campaign is to go to voters where invited to push back on false, misleading information and conspiracy. It's been a real honor to go talk about my campaign for 10 minutes and then answer questions for an hour and 45 minutes. And I haven't seen my opponent doing that. 30-second spots saying, trust me, I'm your government, isn't going to get us through this. I have pushed back against President Trump, former President Trump, candidate President Trump, and anyone who seeks to mislead it. My opponent won't even stand up to her party when they spent millions of dollars propping up the candidate saying exactly what she says she hates. So I've done it when it's difficult. I will continue to do that against either party that misleads our voters.
But I'm trying to understand the difference. Why will you literally stand shoulder to shoulder with the Republican Lieutenant Governor candidate Danny Moore, who's an election denier, but then another election denier, Joe Oltmann, you said that the two of them campaigning together was reprehensible. Where's the line?
Actually, when Danny Moore was appointed by the governor candidate Heidi Ganahl, I said that I was disappointed in that appointment because of his comments. What I will continue to do is not wag my finger and lecture people about their questions, but talk to them. I don't think that if we vilify people with good conscience like voters, we should push back on candidates. I've reached out to all of them to provide information, opportunities to visit with county clerks, to learn more about elections, and I think that's made a difference. I will continue to run my own race, who I am, representing all voters, regardless, in a nonpartisan way, not dividing people and vilifying them.
Colorado's elections are run by elected Democrats and Republicans. Would a less partisan approach build faith in the process? We'll hear from the candidates for Secretary of State when Next Presents. The race for Secretary of State continues after this. Given how politically charged election administration has become, we asked Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold and Republican Pam Anderson if there's a good argument, other than the fact that it's in the state law, that we should have partisan elected officials run our elections at the county and state level. Here's that, along with their closing statements, as Next presents the race for Secretary of State.
It is the law. It's our constitutional law. And I think it's important that elected officials are accountable to voters. There are now two big lie to election denier Secretary of State in the United States. They're in Texas and Florida. They're both appointed. Coloradans can see from my track record that when I expand access to voters, I expand it regardless of zip code, regardless of political affiliation. When I've taken action to make sure our election infrastructure has been secure, I've taken action in both Elbert County and Mesa County, counties led by Democratic clerks, Republican clerks, but also in Pueblo and Alamosa, counties led by Democratic clerks. So I think that accountability is really important.
Thank you very much. I get the partisans running elections as Colorado law. Is it the smart way to do it?
So I have an interesting perspective on this because I was an elected nonpartisan municipal clerk. And in our debate last week, I said that I would be open to discussing it remaining elected, but also being a nonpartisan office, because I do think that the center point of my campaign is how much politicians taking these offices and using this platform to elevate their own political profile, raise millions of dollars to then spend and misinform people about their record. So I think we should have a conversation about this, because the largest group of voters in Colorado are unaffiliated. They've left both the left and the right, and I think we need trusted nonpartisan leadership.
Each candidate will now make a 1-minute closing statement. We determined this by a coin toss earlier, and Ms. Griswold, you'll go first.
As Secretary of State, I've been a champion to increasing access to Colorado voters. We've increased drop boxes by 65%, set up automatic voter registration, which led to over 350,000 eligible Republicans, Democrat, and unaffiliated voters casting a ballot. We also guaranteed access on public universities and tribal lands. And when the pandemic hit, we got to work to make sure that Colorado voters had the access that they need, and all of it combined led to Colorado having the second highest turnout in the nation. When elected to a second term, I plan to continue to open up access, like I mentioned, until we're the first state in the country for voter turnout. There's more work to do. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to continue to see disinformation, threats against election workers, threats against our election infrastructure. And I will continue to act decisively. An example is in Mesa County. I acted decisively when the rogue county clerk tried to compromise her own voting equipment and even appointed my 2018 Republican opponent to oversee the county. As long as I'm Secretary of State, I'll make sure that every eligible voter, regardless of zip code, can have their voice heard in free and fair elections.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. As your next Secretary of State, I will bring my small business background. As well as my experience of 20 years as an election administrator to restore professionalism and stable leadership and trusted leadership to the office. I will restore confidence by doubling down on our American values for a fair referee for free, fair, and accurate elections. I will also stand and continue to stand like I have for 20 years for the truth and a nonpartisan, fair way against any mis or disinformation or those that seek to hurt our democracy. It's why I was proud to be featured on the cover of Time magazine this month as a defender of democracy, and for my nonpartisan leadership endorsed by over 40 state and local election heroes across our state that have supported my campaign. I believe that the Secretary of State's office is a destination, not a stepping stone. Democracy is my life's work. I hope you can vote for me.
You've been watching portions of Next Presents, the race for Secretary of State. The rest of that debate is streaming on 9 News Plus at 6:30, or you can watch it all right now on 9news.com or on the 9 News and Next YouTube channels. It's one of an unprecedented 6 debates that we're televising this year. Debates in Colorado's 7th and 8th congressional districts and every statewide office except governor. On Friday night, Democratic Senator Michael Bennet and Republican challenger Joe O'Dea will debate here on 9 News at 7 o'clock. We can send you the full debate schedule and a link to the video of the entire debate you just saw if you text the word debate to 303-871-1491. Feedback on voting from Linda tonight, who says, is it legal in Colorado to drop off a ballot for a family member at a drop box? It is legal, Linda. You can drop off a ballot for a friend, a family member, a neighbor, just no more than 10 in addition to your own. No more than 10 ballots in addition to your own. See you next time.